The camera descends slowly from the vaulted ceiling of courtroom 7, the grand wood-paneled federal courtroom of the Harrington estate and asset dispute proceedings. Tall windows pull cold gray morning light into long, deliberate columns across the floor. The gallery is full to its last seat. The air carries polished mahogany, expensive cologne, the particular electricity of a room that believes it already knows its ending. On the right side, Dominic's empire assembled, 4 attorneys arranged like a battalion behind their table. Business partners in the gallery front rows, his mother in the second row, with pearls and the expression of a woman attending a celebration. And beside Dominic's legal team at a separate table, formally seated as a named party in these proceedings, Claudette Beaumont. White suit, crimson lips, both hands folded on the table in front of her with the composed, absolute satisfaction of a woman who filed her claim 3 months ago and has spent every day since then decorating the life she is certain she is about to legally occupy. She is not hiding in the gallery today. She is at the table. She made sure of that. On the left side of the courtroom, 1 chair. 1 woman. No family. No entourage. No one. Elena sits completely alone, navy blazer perfectly pressed, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. 1 attorney beside her, Marcus Cole, quiet and still. The gallery murmurs. People lean to each other. The empty chairs beside Elena are loud in the way only emptiness can be loud. Claudette looks across the room at Elena. And she smiles. Slow, deliberate, the smile of someone who has already signed the papers in her imagination and is simply waiting for the formality of ink. Elena holds that gaze for 3 seconds exactly. Then she looks away. Not in defeat, in the quiet, settled way of someone who does not need to respond to things that are already finished. But no one in this room understands that yet. They see defeat. They see abandonment. They see a woman sitting alone while the woman who replaced her sits at the official table. The gavel falls, and Elena traces her mother's gold bracelet with her thumb, once patient like a prayer that already knows it will be answered. The proceedings open, and Claudette does not wait for permission. She rises from her chair at the claimant's table, yes, her own table, because she filed a formal legal claim to a portion of the Harrington estate 3 months ago and made certain the court assigned her a table, and she straightens her white suit jacket with the deliberate, unhurried precision of a woman who has decided this room belongs to her story today. She looks around the courtroom, at the gallery, at the judge's bench, at the wood-paneled walls and the tall windows and the official seal above the door. She looks at all of it the way a person looks at something they are about to own. Then she looks at Elena, and she smiles. Not the small private smile from the corridor, a full smile, a public smile, the smile of a woman who wants the room to see exactly how certain she is. Raymond Fitch presents the morning's opening argument first, the April 2019 document, the portfolio valuation, the financial disclosures, all arranged to present Elena as a woman who signed away her claims willingly and is now attempting to reclaim what she herself released. Then Victoria Marsh rises for Claudette's claim, and she speaks with the polished confidence of a woman whose client told her this morning, "I want them to hear every word clearly. I want her to hear every word clearly." Victoria Marsh says, "Your Honor, my client Claudette Beaumont is not here today as a background figure. She is here as a named claimant with documented standing. Across 3 years, Ms. Beaumont maintained a committed, documented, established partnership with Mr. Harrington. She contributed to his professional development, his social network, his daily life. She was present in ways that Ms. Voss," she pauses and looks directly at Elena, "was not. She lets that land." Then she says, "We are requesting this court award, Ms." Beaumont, the residential property at 14 Caldwell Manor, the primary Harrington residence, and a proportional share of the post-2019 investment portfolio. These are not excessive requests. These are the documented entitlements of a woman who was genuinely present in a genuine partnership. She closes her folder. She says, and Your Honor, given what this court can see before it today, she gestures openly at Elena's single attorney, at the empty chairs beside Elena, at the absent family, at the visible public loneliness of a woman who came to court with no one to contrast between the two claimants before this court speaks for itself. The gallery absorbs this. And then the murmuring begins. Claudette sits back down. She crosses her legs. She smooths her lapel. And then she does the thing that defines this moment, the thing that the gallery will remember and that Elena will hold in her memory alongside the gold bracelet and her mother's voice and everything else she carries. She turns fully in her chair and looks at Elena across the room. In front of the judge. In front of the gallery. In front of everyone. And she says loud enough for the front rows to hear, soft enough to perform intimacy, "It is over, Elena. It has been over for a long time. I just finally made it official." A ripple moves through the gallery. Someone in the second row laughs quickly, quietly but audibly. Dominic does not stop her. He straightens his tie and looks at the judge's bench and says nothing, which is the loudest possible endorsement. Elena looks at Claudette. She holds that look for 3 full seconds. Her face carries nothing, not anger, not tears, not the crumbling expression Claudette is performing for. Just the level, patient, settled look of someone who is holding a clock in their hands and watching the final seconds count down. Then she looks away. During the morning recess, the corridor outside courtroom 7 carries the energy of a celebration that has started early. Dominic's associates cluster near the window in satisfied groups. Gerald Marsh passes Elena without acknowledgement the particular cruelty of being looked through by someone who has decided you no longer occupy their consideration. And Claudette walks the corridor with Victoria Marsh and 2 associates, and she does not lower her voice when she passes Elena. She stops, turns, faces Elena directly. 4 feet between them in a public corridor with people watching from both directions. Claudette says, "Do you know what I did last week?" She tilts her head. "I had the master bedroom at Caldwell Manor repainted. Ivory and gold. I chose the furniture. I chose the curtains. I stood in your bedroom, Elena," she lets each word land separately, "and I chose everything. Because it is mine now. The house is mine. The life is mine. The man is mine. And this court," she glances back at the courtroom doors, "is about to confirm every single part of that in writing." She looks at Elena's empty corridor, the absence of anyone who came for her, the single attorney visible through the courtroom window, the chairs that have been empty all morning. She says, "No one came for you. Not one person. That is your answer. That is everything you need to know about where you stand and what you are worth to the people who were supposed to love you." She turns and walks away. White suit. Precise heels. Absolute certainty. Elena watches her go. She looks down at the gold bracelet on her wrist. She runs her thumb across it once. Twice. She says nothing. Because Claudette just stood in a public corridor and declared that she had won everything. She said it loudly. She said it with witnesses. She said it with the full confidence of a woman who has no idea what is 4 minutes away from walking through that door. And Elena simply breathes, steady and slow, the way her grandmother taught her to breathe before the moment when everything changes. Let me tell you who Elena Voss really is, because this is the part they never bothered to learn. and their failure to learn it is the single most expensive mistake any of them will ever make. The Voss estate sits behind iron gates bearing a family crest older than most of the buildings in this city's financial district. Stone walls covered in 3 generations of climbing ivy, grounds that extend further than comfortable comprehension. The particular quiet of a family that has never needed to announce itself because the world already rearranges around the name. Reginald Voss built his first enterprise at 22 with his mother Marguerite's initial capital and a ferocity that became legend across 2 continents before he was 40. The Voss Foundation established 1994 Controls Land Development Portfolios, a private investment firm operating across 9 countries, philanthropic networks reaching into the highest levels of government policy, and a level of structural influence that most people spend entire careers assembling and never fully achieve. Elena was raised inside this. She learned to read financial statements before she learned to drive. She sat in boardrooms before she ever walked into a university. She spoke 3 languages fluently before she was 16 and understood the language of power, the real language, the one beneath words, before she was 20. She was, by every measure, the heir apparent of everything the Voss name carried. And the Voss name carried a great deal. And then she met Dominic Harrington at a function she almost did not attend, and she did what brilliant, strategic, self-possessed women sometimes do against every instinct they carry. She loved him. Fully, without condition, without strategy, just love. The most dangerous gift a powerful woman can offer a man who does not understand what he is being given. He spent 3 years performing worthiness. He was charming, strategically humble before Reginald, careful and patient and precisely calculated. He understood with the instinct of a man for whom beautiful women from powerful families represent the fastest available road to everything he wanted, exactly which performance to give, and exactly how long to sustain it. Even Reginald, cautious and methodical and deeply loving, eventually gave his blessing. The wedding was extraordinary. Marguerite sat in the front pew in her burgundy silk and said nothing during the ceremony. She simply watched. She was the only one who was never fully convinced. She told Reginald afterward, in the private language of 2 people who have shared decades and losses and the weight of a name, that boy is performing. He is performing very well. But everything he is showing us is a performance. Reginald said she loves him. Marguerite said, I know. That is what concerns me. For 12 years, Elena was a devoted wife, not a passive one, a strategic one. She managed the Harrington household, supported his ambitions publicly, and deliberately chose not to leverage the Voss name on his behalf because she understood, in the way women understand things before they can prove them, that Dominic wanted to use what she came from rather than love who she was. 3 years ago, Claudette. Late nights. The particular silence of a man who has already left a marriage in his heart and is too cowardly to leave it in practice. Elena knew. She always knew. But she did not react. She gathered. Quietly, methodically, in the way her grandmother had taught her before she ever needed to apply the lesson you never show your hand before every card you hold is exactly the card you need it to be. And she discovered something in her gathering that even she had not anticipated. Something beyond the affair. Something beyond Dominic's concealment of funds. Something the court would eventually need to hear from someone with the authority to say it in a way that could not be dismissed. 2 months before this, hearing the private meeting in Reginald's study. Firelight. Books on every wall. Marguerite in her corner chair. Reginald leaning forward across his desk. Elena. Tell me what you need. One call ends this before it begins. Elena. Calm and precise no. Father, not yet. Reginald, then tell me when. Elena, I need them to believe they have already won. I need Claudette to sit at that table in her white suit and file her claim and smile at me in that corridor and believe completely that she has taken everything. I need Dominic to smile his full smile. I need all of them to be certain. And then she paused. I need you to walk through that door. And I need you to let Judge Aldwell speak. Silence. Reginald studied his daughter with the look of a man who raised someone to become precisely this. In her corner, Marguerite opened her pale gray eyes, and she looked at Elena with the only expression she keeps in reserve for unguarded pride. She said your mother used to plan the same way. Always let them think they'd won first. She said the fall is longer when they believe they're still climbing. It was never desperation. It was never chaos. It was choreography. And it had been running, quietly and flawlessly, for 6 months. The afternoon session opens and Claudette has recalibrated her posture. She sits at her table with the forward, alert energy of someone watching the final confirmation of a victory that was decided long before today. Her white suit is still immaculate, her crimson lips still certain. She is performing ownership so completely that she has stopped distinguishing the performance from reality. Victoria Marsh presents Claudette's claim with polished precision, the documented joint living arrangements. The financial transfers Dominic made to Claudette's account has what Marsh characterizes as partnership contributions, photographs, messages, testimony from 2 of Dominic's associates confirming Claudette's role in his professional and social life across 3 years. Victoria Marsh says my client did not come to this court as a secondary consideration. She came as a primary claimant. She built something real with Mr. Harrington across 3 years. The court should recognize that reality. Then she says, and with respect, Your Honor, the question before this court today is not simply what Miss Voss believes she is entitled to from a marriage that clearly had already ended in practice long before it ended in law. The question is what my client, who was present, who was committed, who is here today with documentation and witnesses, is entitled to from the estate that she helped shape. She pauses. Then she looks at Elena's side of the room, at the single attorney, at the empty chairs. She says, and given the support or lack thereof that Ms. Voss has been able to assemble for these proceedings, I think the answer to that question is becoming increasingly clear. More murmuring from the gallery. Dominic's mother whispers something behind her gloved hand. Gerald Marsh nods slowly with the satisfaction of someone watching a prediction confirm itself. Dominic sits back, crosses his legs, adjusts his cufflinks. He is the picture of a man whose victory is on schedule. Marcus Cole rises and responds with the measured calm of a man holding cards very close to a very still chest, Your Honor. The picture before this court is significantly more complex than what has been presented, and we intend to demonstrate that complexity fully. Victoria Marsh says we look forward to whatever demonstration counsel is able to produce. And then, from outside, unseen, the long stone corridor beyond the carved wooden doors. A security guard at the front entrance straightens without being asked. His posture corrects itself automatically, the unconscious physical response to authority approaching from 50 yards away. Through the tall glass front doors, 3 black vehicles move through the iron gates and into the parking court. Unhurried, deliberate, the movement of people who have never needed urgency because the world adjusts its pace to accommodate theirs. Inside, Elena writes something in her notepad, folds the corner of the page. Marcus Cole glances at her sideways. She gives him the smallest possible nod. He exhales the breath of a man who has just been confirmed that the support he was promised is 4 minutes from the door. Claudette, watching from across the room, sees the exchange between Elena and her attorney. Something flickers in her green eyes. Brief, contained, she dismisses it. She looks back at her own attorney. She smooths her lapel. She has decided she has already won. She will hold that decision for approximately 4 more minutes. Late afternoon. The light through the courtroom windows has shifted to the heavy gold of hours that have been pressing in one direction all day. The proceedings have moved in Claudette's favor on the surface, on the visible surface, where everyone in that gallery is reading the afternoon. Judge Aldwell sets down her pen, removes her glasses, looks at Elena directly, with the focused attention of a woman who has something to say and is choosing her moment with the precision of someone who has been doing this for 23 years. Judge Aldwell says, "Miss Voss, I want to address you directly. This court has received comprehensive presentations from both Mr. Harrington's counsel and Miss Beaumont's counsel. What I have before me at this moment is a signed renunciation document, a portfolio valuation, and a formal common law partnership claim from a third party with documented evidence of her relationship with your former husband. Your counsel has referenced supporting documentation and witnesses regarding the circumstances of the 2019 signing. But as of this moment, that support has not materialized before this court. I need you to understand clearly what that means for this proceeding." The courtroom goes absolutely still. Every eye in the room moves to Elena. She stands, navy blazer perfectly fitted, hands clasped in front of her, chin exactly level. Elena says, "Your Honor, my attorney and I are fully aware of what this court requires. We are prepared to proceed." Judge Aldwell says, "Miss Voss, without corroboration of your claims, the document stands. And with Miss Beaumont's claim formally entered and documented, this court's options in your favor become," she pauses, "significantly limited." A long silence. Elena says very quietly, very precisely, "I understand, Your Honor." She sits. And the room releases. The contained, managed, barely controlled satisfaction of the right side of that courtroom exhales itself into the air like something that has been held too long and finally does not need to be held anymore. Claudette turns to Victoria Marsh and says something low and certain, and the two women exchange the look of a shared victory, confirmed. Dominic allows himself, finally, completely the full smile. Not the managed version, the real one, the one he has been building toward all day. He looks across the room at Elena with the full, unhidden satisfaction of a man who has won, who knew he would win, who is simply watching the last piece fall into place. And then from outside the massive carved wooden doors at the back of the courtroom, footsteps. Measured, deliberate, the footsteps of people who have selected their pace and see no reason to alter it for anyone. The bailiff at the back of the room looks toward the doors. Elena does not look. She looks down at her notepad. At the gold bracelet on her wrist, her thumb traces it once. Then she closes her notepad, folds her hands on top of it, and in the quietest possible way she straightens. Shoulders back, chin lifted, a breath drawn slowly and released with the absolute steadiness of someone who has been waiting for precisely this moment for precisely 6 months. The doors begin to open. The doors open the way Reginald Voss does everything, with the unhurried, absolute certainty of someone who has never once needed to force a room to pay attention, because rooms simply do inevitably, instinctively, the way compass needles orient to north without being asked. The first thing the courtroom sees is the light from the corridor behind the open doors. And then, filling that doorframe with the quiet, total authority of someone for whom an entrance is simply the act of arriving, Reginald Voss. 6'2". Silver hair combed back with old-world precision. Charcoal double-breasted European suit. Hand-carved ebony cane carried at his side, not for support, for history. His hazel eyes, Elena's eyes, sweep the entire courtroom in a single comprehensive survey that takes 3 seconds and registers everything. The effect is immediate and physical. Heads turn, not one by one, simultaneously, The entire gallery rotates toward the back of the room the way sunflowers rotate toward light, and involuntary, collective. Instinctive response to the arrival of something that radiates authority from across a room. Gerald Marsh stops mid-sentence. The word dissolves in his mouth. One of Dominic's junior attorneys looks up from his documents and goes very still. The particular stillness of someone whose brain has just recognized something their body understood first. Raymond Fitch turns fully in his chair. His pen stops. He looks at Reginald Voss, and something happens to his face that 25 years of legal training cannot fully prevent it falls. Not completely, but enough. Enough for everyone near him to see it. And Claudette turns, and the crimson lips part, and the cat-green eyes, so bright with certain victory 30 seconds ago, go to Reginald Voss and then move rapidly. Involuntarily to the Voss Foundation crest on the document one of the arriving attorneys is carrying. Her brain makes the connection. And the particular color that expensive foundation cannot entirely conceal drains from beneath it. Because Claudette knows that name. Everyone in this city knows that name. Everyone in this courtroom, in this legal world, in this financial universe knows what the Voss Foundation means and what it controls and what it is capable of directing toward a problem it has decided to address. Behind Reginald, 3 attorneys in dark suits with leather briefcases that do not belong to courthouse corridors. Daniel Prescott, James Holt, Serena Vance, men and women whose names appear on Supreme Court arguments, whose hourly rates exist in a different numerical universe than Raymond Fitch's, whose presence alone is a document that reads whatever you believed this afternoon was going to be. You have fundamentally misunderstood the situation. And behind them moving at her own pace, which has always been the only pace that mattered grandmother Marguerite Voss. The gallery goes silent. Not the murmuring, fading to quiet kind of silence. The immediate, total breath held silence of a room that has recognized something it was not prepared for. She is 84 years old. She is barely 5'4", and she is the most powerful presence that has entered this building today. Her white hair is set in perfect waves. Her deep burgundy silk suit is immaculate in the way that only things cared for across decades achieve. The single strand of pearls at her throat catches the afternoon light with quiet, absolute authority. And her pale gray eyes, those eyes that have seen the construction and the protection and the endurance of everything the Voss name represents across 50 years of decisions that shaped this city, are completely calm. Completely, terrifyingly calm. She does not look at Dominic. She does not look at Raymond Fitch. She does not look at the gallery. She does not look at Claudette. She looks at the back of her granddaughter's head. And even that look is private, containing 34 years of love and pride and the particular aching tenderness of a woman watching someone she raised to be extraordinary demonstrate exactly that. The group moves down the center aisle. The gallery shifts to make room without being asked. Bodies move unconsciously away from concentrated authority. It is not a choice. It is physics. Claudette watches them come. Her white suit, which was a celebration an hour ago, now simply looks like clothing. Her hands, which were folded in proprietorial satisfaction on the table, have tightened. Victoria Marsh leans toward her and says something quietly. Claudette does not respond. She is watching Reginald Voss walk toward the front of that courtroom, and she is doing the mathematics of this moment, and the mathematics are not producing the numbers she spent 3 years expecting. Reginald reaches the gate in the low wooden divider. He looks at the bailiff. Reginald says quietly, without drama, in the tone of a man who has never needed drama because his presence has always been sufficient, "We are with Miss Elena Voss, her family and legal team. I believe the court was expecting us. He produces a single folded document from his breast pocket and hands it to the bailiff with the ease of someone completing a routine. The bailiff opens it, reads it, and recalibrates visibly, completely his entire posture. He opens the gate. The left side of the courtroom, the side that was empty all morning, the side whose emptiness everyone read as evidence of a woman with no one, no standing, no support in the world, fills. Quietly, completely, with the most formidable assembly of people who have entered this building today. Marguerite is the last to be seated. She moves to the chair directly beside Elena and lowers herself into it with the dignity of someone performing a sacred act in the most ordinary possible way. She places her small, elegant handbag on her lap. She settles. And then, without looking at Elena, without announcement, without theater, she reaches over and places her small, pale, paper-thin hand over her granddaughter's folded hands on the closed notepad. Elena's eyes close. 1 second. 1 single second in which 12 years of patient endurance and strategic silence and choosing grace over collapse and dignity over desperation moves through her in a single breath that no one in the room can hear, but anyone watching closely enough can see in the slight, releasing movement of her shoulders. When her eyes open, something has changed in them. Something that was being held very tightly has been set down. She is still composed. She is still. But she is no longer carrying it alone. Judge Aldwell, who has watched every moment of this arrival with the controlled expression of a woman who has presided over 23 years of courtroom surprises, straightens in her chair. She looks at the arriving party over her silver-framed glasses. Judge Aldwell says we appear to have new counsel joining the proceedings. Please identify yourselves for the record. Daniel Prescott rises. He says, Daniel Prescott, Your Honor, joined by colleagues James Holt and Serena Vance, representing Miss Elena Voss. In addition, Your Honor, he lifts his briefcase onto the table, opens it, produces a substantial and immaculately organized portfolio I am presenting to this court today, a complete documentation package. This includes the original unredacted financial disclosures from 2018 and 2019, a sworn deposition from the notary present at the April 2019 signing confirming that Ms. Voss was not provided complete financial information before signing, testimony from 3 independent forensic accountants regarding the circumstances of that signing, and he produces a second, separate document, a forensic accounting report demonstrating that assets Mr. Harrington claims as post-2019 independent ventures were seeded using funds drawn from the joint marital account prior to the signing date. He sets the portfolio on the table. He does not sit yet. He says we are fully prepared to present this documentation in complete detail, Your Honor. We are also prepared, at the court's direction, to address the third-party claim filed by Miss Beaumont. In that regard, we have additional documentation we believe this court will find significant. Raymond Fitch is on his feet. Raymond Fitch says, Your Honor, this is completely irregular. This documentation was not, Daniel Prescott says, the documentation was formally filed with this court 72 hours ago, Your Honor. I have the time-stamped and certified filing confirmation. He slides a single page across to the judge. Judge Aldwell takes it, reads it, and something moves through her eyes. Not surprise, something more deliberate than surprise. The look of a woman who has been holding a piece of this puzzle since the pretrial submissions and has just received the final piece that tells her the moment has arrived. She sets the page down. She says, Mr. Fitch, the documentation was filed and processed appropriately. Your team will have opportunity to review. We will take a 30-minute recess. She does not look at Fitch when she says it. She is already looking at her own case file, at a document she has been carrying since before today began. The gavel falls for recess. And Dominic, for the first time today, looks at Elena, not with the full smile, not with the managed confidence. He looks at her the way a man looks at something he thought he understood completely and has just realized he never understood at all. Elena does not return the look. She is speaking softly with her grandmother. Marguerite's hand is still over hers. Reginald stands behind his daughter's chair, not possessively. Protectively, the way fathers stand behind daughters they have spent lifetimes being proud of. Court reconvenes after the 30-minute recess. The room is different now. The right side carries the subdued, recalculating energy of people who walked in this morning with a script and are now holding pages that no longer match the play being performed. Raymond Fitch's jacket has the slight rumple of a man who has been running calculations that refuse to produce the numbers he needs. Dominic sits forward rather than back, the posture of someone who has stopped performing confidence because the performance requires more energy than he currently has available. Claudette sits at her table. Her white suit is still immaculate. Her crimson lips are still set. But her hands, which were folded in proprietorial satisfaction all morning, are now pressed flat against the table in front of her, the gesture of someone pressing down on something they are trying to keep from rising. Daniel Prescott presents the forensic evidence with the unhurried precision of a surgeon who has never once found urgency necessary because the outcome has always been predetermined by preparation. He walks Judge Aldwell through the financial movement, the joint account activity, the notary's sworn deposition, the expert testimony on the informational circumstances of the 2019 signing. He presents each document the way a person places stones deliberately, sequentially, building something that will not move once it is built. Judge Aldwell listens. She asks 5 questions. Every question is precise, and every answer confirms what she has already understood from the case file she has been carrying since before today began. Raymond Fitch objects twice. Both objections are overruled without deliberation. And then Daniel Prescott says, "Your Honor, we have concluded our presentation." The documentation is complete. He sits. And Judge Aldwell does something that silences the room before she has said a single word. She closes every folder in front of her. She removes her glasses. She sets them on the bench beside her deliberately, specifically, in the way a person sets something down when they are about to need both hands free. She folds those hands in front of her. And she looks at the room, not at the attorneys, not at the documentation, at the room, the full room, the gallery and the tables and the people who spent all day arranged in their certainties. The silence is total. And then Judge Aldwell opens the folder that has been sitting to her left since 9 o'clock this morning. The folder no one asked about. The folder she placed there herself before the session began and has not touched until this moment. She produces 3 pages clipped together. She holds them in a way that tells the room before she reads a single word that what is on these pages is the reason today was always going to end differently than anyone on the right side of this room believed. Judge Aldwell says before this court addresses the documentation presented this afternoon, I am going to bring something before this room that has been part of this case file since the pretrial submissions. I have been waiting for the complete picture before addressing it. That picture is now complete. She looks down at the pages, then up at the room. She says during the standard financial disclosure process for these proceedings, this court received transaction records from a third-party account. She pauses. An account registered under the name of Claudette Beaumont. The room does not move. It does not breathe. Claudette's hands press harder against the table. Judge Aldwell says these records document 18 months of financial transfers. From the Harrington joint marital account, not Mr. Harrington's individual account, the joint marital account. The account to which Elena Voss was a full legal party and co-signatory. These transfers were made across 18 months. They total, she looks down at the page, $347,000. She looks up. She says, directed to Miss Beaumont's personal account. A sound moves through the gallery. Not a gasp. Something more complicated than a gasp, the sound of a room processing something that reorganizes everything it believed about the afternoon it just witnessed. Dominic's mother's gloved hand drops from her mouth to her lap. Gerald Marsh stops writing. Claudette's crimson lips part. No sound comes out. Her green eyes, which have been sharp and calculating and certain all day, go to the judge, and then to the pages in the judge's hands, and then to Dominic, and then back to the judge. The particular rapid eye movement of a person whose brain is receiving information faster than it can organize it. Judge Aldwell says, and the court notes the following. These transfers began 4 months before the April 2019 document was presented to Miss Voss for her signature. She lets that sit in the room. She says when Miss Voss was asked to sign the renunciation document in April 2019, she was shown the balance of the joint marital account. That balance, she holds up the page, did not reflect these transfers. She was shown a number that had been made artificially and deliberately lower by the systematic removal of funds that were being directed across 18 months to a third party who is seated in this courtroom today. She looks at Claudette. Directly, without mediation. She says Ms. Voss signed a legal document that determined her financial future. She signed it based on financial information that was materially false. Information that was made false by transfers to the woman who then filed a legal claim to the assets of the marriage those transfers were made from. The gallery is completely silent now. The kind of silence that has weight and temperature. Claudette's attorney, Victoria Marsh, leans toward her client and says something urgent and low. Claudette does not respond. She is looking at the judge with the expression of someone standing in a room that was solid floor 30 seconds ago and is now something else entirely beneath her feet. Judge Aldwell says this court is invalidating the April 2019 document. Effective immediately. It was obtained through the presentation of materially incomplete financial information and cannot stand as a valid legal instrument. She turns the page. She says this court is ordering a full forensic audit of all Harrington financial accounts from 2017 to present. The findings of that audit will determine the full scope of this proceeding's final settlement. She turns the final page. She says, and as for the claim filed by Miss Beaumont, the room leans forward. Imperceptibly, collectively, Judge Aldwell says this court cannot recognize a partnership claim from a party whose documented financial relationship with Mr. Harrington was funded through unauthorized transfers from a joint marital account. What Miss Beaumont received across 18 months was not partnership contribution. It was not shared investment. It was not the documented evidence of a genuine co-built life. It was based on the records before this court marital property transferred without the knowledge or consent of the legal co-owner of that property. She sets the pages down. She says the third-party claim filed by Claudette Beaumont is dismissed in its entirety. The residential property at 14 Caldwell Manor remains a marital asset subject to equitable division. The post-2019 portfolio, funded in part by joint marital account activity prior to the signing date, is subject to full forensic review and equitable division. And the $347,000 transferred to Ms. Beaumont's account is classified as unauthorized disbursement of marital property and is subject to full recovery. She pauses. She looks at Claudette one final time. She says Miss Beaumont came to this court today believing she had won everything. The court's records suggest she was given things that were never the giver's alone to give. Independent legal counsel, she says, is strongly advised before the audit reaches its conclusions. She picks up her gavel. She says we will reconvene in 3 weeks for the full settlement hearing. Court is in recess. The gavel falls. And the sound of it, that single, final, irrevocable sound, moves through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples reach every corner, every face. Every certainty that walked through those doors this morning, wearing a white suit and crimson lips, and the absolute conviction that today belonged to her. Claudette sits at her table and does not move for a long moment. The white suit is still immaculate. The crimson lips are still crimson. But the woman wearing them is somewhere else entirely, somewhere in the rapid, unwilling. Very public process of understanding that she did not win everything. She did not win anything. She was given things that were stolen before they were given. And now the court has said so, in writing, on the record, in front of everyone. Victoria Marsh is speaking to her. Claudette is not hearing it. She looks across the room at Elena. Elena is speaking softly with her grandmother. Marguerite's hand is still over hers. Reginald stands behind his daughter's chair with the expression of a man watching someone he is proud of receive what they were always owed. Elena does not look at Claudette. She does not need to. The judge already said everything that needed to be said, and she said it in a way that this room, this gallery, these attorneys, these witnesses, this record will carry out of these doors and into the world. Dominic sits in his chair, and the expensive suit and the gold cufflinks and the full smile that was so complete an hour ago are just objects on a man who is doing the mathematics of what the next several years of his life have just become. He looks at Claudette. She does not look back. They are two people who made a calculation together and discovered publicly, simultaneously and irreversibly, that the foundation they built it on was never solid. It was always Elena's. It was always going to come back to Elena. The judge simply made it official. 3 weeks later, the final settlement arrives on a Tuesday morning that is clear and unhurried and looks, from the outside, like any other morning. These mornings always surprise people. The ones that change everything tend to look ordinary right until the moment they don't. Elena receives the outcome in her father's study. The familiar books on every wall, the fire in the grate, Marguerite in her chair, Daniel Prescott presenting the final numbers with the composed satisfaction of a man delivering what was always going to arrive on the schedule it was always going to arrive on. The April 2019 document invalidated and removed from the record. The post-marriage portfolio subject to full equitable division. The forensic audit confirming the joint account transfers in their entirety. The $347,000 recovered as marital property. Dominic's financial fortress, constructed across 12 years on Elena's investment and 3 years of deliberate concealment, dismantled methodically with the precision that comes from having planned for this exact moment for exactly 6 months. Claudette's claim dismissed. Her independent legal counsel engaged in working. The next several months of her life complicated in ways she did not anticipate when she walked into courtroom 7 in her white suit and her certainty. Elena listens to all of it, nods once. Then she looks at her father. Reginald Voss, who has built enterprises and faced government committees and navigated the loss of his wife and 30 years of carrying a name that does not permit weakness, allows himself, in the privacy of his own study, a full and unhurried smile. The kind fathers save for moments they have been waiting for across years they would never admit to counting. Marguerite reaches into her handbag and produces a small wrapped box. She places it on the desk in front of Elena. No announcement. No ceremony. In the way she does everything that matters quietly, directly, without requiring the moment to perform itself. Marguerite says, and this is the only time in this entire story we have heard her speak at full length. Her voice low and clear and carrying the absolute authority of 8 decades of knowing exactly what she means. Your mother planned the same way. Always let them believe they had won first. She said the higher they believe they have climbed, the longer the fall when they discover the ground was never where they thought it was. She would have been sitting exactly where you are sitting, and she would have been exactly as proud of you as I am right now. Elena opens the box. Inside a second gold bracelet, the match to the one she has worn every day for 18 years. Her mother's pair. 2 bracelets. 2 wrists. Something that was always meant to be whole and is now, finally, complete. She puts it on. She holds both arms out for a moment, one on each side, both bracelets catching the firelight from the grate. Then she lowers them, folds her hands, breathes, long and slow, and completely free. Here's what this day proved. Here's what Dominic Harrington learned too late, and Claudette Beaumont learned publicly, and every person in that gallery will carry home with them. Never mistake a woman's chosen silence for an absence of voice. Never mistake her patience for powerlessness. Never mistake her grace for emptiness or her stillness for surrender. The most protected people in any room are sometimes the ones who appear most alone, because real family, real love, real power does not announce itself in ordinary moments. It holds. It waits. It plans. It arrives at exactly the moment it was always going to arrive. And when it comes, it does not shout. It does not perform. It simply walks through the door, takes its seat, places a hand over folded hands on a closed notepad, and changes everything. The judge drops the final truth, not because she was asked to, but because truth, when it is properly prepared and patiently placed, arrives on its own schedule, and it is always exactly on time. Elena Voss walked out of that courthouse with her father on one side and her grandmother's hand in hers, and both gold bracelets catching the morning light, and every empty chair that defined her morning so thoroughly and completely full that the room itself could not remember what it had looked like before. She never looked back. She never needed to. What was behind her was finished. What was in front of her was always going to be this. 3 questions for this community. First question: Claudette sat at that table in her white suit and publicly declared her victory before the court had spoken. Have you ever watched someone celebrate a win that was never actually theirs? What happened when the truth arrived? Second question: Judge Aldwell held that document all day and waited for exactly the right moment to speak it. Do you believe that timing is the most important part of truth, or should the truth always be spoken the moment it is known? Third question: Elena chose to walk into that courtroom completely alone, knowing her family was already on their way, knowing the judge was already holding the document. Would you have had the strength to sit in that chair and wait, or would you have broken before the ending arrived? If Elena's story moved something in you today, if you have ever sat in your own empty chair while someone else performed victory over your life, hit that like button right now and let this story reach the person who needs to see it most. Subscribe to Karma's Heiress for stories that remind the world that dignity is a strategy, patience is a weapon, silence is sometimes the loudest thing in a room, and the most powerful truth is always the one delivered last. Share this, because somewhere right now someone is sitting alone in a room full of people who have already written her ending. Let her know the ending belongs to her. It always did. She simply has to wait for the judge to say so. Final frame. Elena on the courthouse steps. Morning light on both gold bracelets. Her father beside her. Her grandmother's hand in hers. She looks up. She breathes. She is exactly where she was always going to be. Fade to black. One piano note. Then silence. Then the kind of quiet that only comes after something has been completely, finally, and permanently resolved.